A young woman named Leela opened her eyes to a new day as the sun rose above the horizon. She stretched her arms and legs, thankful for another day to live. Leela was born under the sign of Taurus, which bestowed upon her the ability to be strong and endurance. She was a hardworking woman who never gave up, and many admired her bull-like determination. Leela had always had an affinity for the stars and the universe. She believed that her zodiac sign had bestowed upon her a special gift, which she was determined to put to good use. But she had no idea her gift would bring her together with a group of strangers who each possessed their own zodiac power. As fate would have it, Leela was not the only one who felt the call of destiny that day. A man named Leo was waking up in the bustling city under the sign of Leo, which granted him the power of courage and leadership. He was self-assured and charismatic, and his lion-like roar could entice others to follow him. He had no idea that fate had a special plan for him that day, which involved a group of strangers who shared his faith in the power of the stars. As Leela and Leo went about their business, they were drawn to a small park in the city center. They came across a strange symbol etched on the ground, which they both recognized as a zodiac symbol. As they approached the symbol, they noticed that others had gathered around it as well. A woman with piercing blue eyes and the Aquarius power stood nearby, while a man with the Gemini power conversed with a woman with the Scorpio power. This group of strangers, each with their own special ability, surprised and intrigued Leela and Leo. They quickly realized that fate had brought them together for a reason, and that they were meant to form an alliance bound by the power of the stars. Leela and Leo were taken aback by the large number of strangers who had gathered in the small park. They could feel a powerful energy emanating from the people around them, and they knew something extraordinary was taking place. They were greeted with warm smiles and open arms as they approached the group. The Aquarius woman introduced herself as Marina, while the Gemini man introduced himself as Alex. Sophia was the Scorpio woman, and they soon discovered that everyone had their own unique zodiac power. Leela and Leo spent the next few hours talking with the other members of the group, sharing stories and learning about each other's abilities. They quickly realized that they all shared one trait, a desire to use their abilities for good. The group made their way to a small restaurant nearby as the sun began to set. They continued to bond over a delicious meal, sharing their hopes and dreams for the future. They discussed how they could use their combined powers to protect those who couldn't protect themselves in order to make a difference in the world. Leela and Leo began to feel a strong connection to the group as they talked. They felt as if they had discovered a kind of family, people who understood them and shared their desire to help others. Over the next few weeks, the group met on a regular basis to train and hone their skills. They learned to collaborate by combining their skills to create powerful and effective attacks. They also started to understand each other's personalities, strengths, and weaknesses, and they grew to respect each other. Leela and Leo began to form a special bond as they spent more time together. They quickly became close friends because they had a similar sense of humor and a love of adventure. They both felt at ease around each other and knew they could count on each other no matter what. However, not everything was perfect. The group began to uncover potential conflicts and disagreements as they got to know each other better. They disagreed about strategy and tactics, and they didn't always agree. Despite their differences, they were always able to come together in the end, united by a common goal. The group grew stronger and more united as the weeks turned into months. They were determined to make a difference in the world, to use their astrological abilities to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. And with each passing day, they became more convinced that they could make a genuine difference. They were the Zodiac Alliance, a group of unlikely friends brought together by the power of the stars. For months, the Zodiac Alliance had been hard at work honing their skills and learning to work as a team. They had faced a few minor threats, but nothing that had put their strength and unity to the test. They knew, however, that it was only a matter of time before a true adversary appeared. A message came through on their communication device one evening while the group was gathered in their training facility. It was a distress call from a nearby town, where an unknown force had attacked a group of people. The message described the attacker as a powerful being with dark energy, and the people of the town were in desperate need of assistance. The Zodiac Alliance sprang into action right away, knowing that this was their first real test. They rushed to the town, which was in complete disarray, with buildings in ruins and people fleeing in all directions. They could feel the dark energy in the air and knew they were up against a formidable foe. As they approached the source of the energy, they encountered a strange creature. It had the appearance of a humanoid, but its skin was dark and twisted, and its eyes glowed with an evil light. The creature appeared to be feeding on the town's fear and chaos, and it grew stronger with each passing moment. The Zodiac Alliance realized they needed to act quickly. They quickly devised a strategy to weaken the creature while protecting one another. They collaborated flawlessly, using their strengths to compensate for each other's weaknesses. Leela used her Taurus power to create an earthen barrier, protecting the group from the creature's attacks. Leo used his Sagittarius power to rain down arrows on the creature, weakening it with each strike. Marina used her Aquarius power to control the water in the area, trapping the creature and limiting its movement. Alex used his Gemini power to create a decoy, which distracted the creature and allowed the others to attack. Sophia used her Scorpio power to strike at the creature's weak point, delivering a powerful blow that appeared to stun it. But just as they thought they had the upper hand, the creature let out a powerful scream that shook the entire area. The Zodiac Alliance staggered back, shaken by the attack's ferocity. They could feel their powers dwindling and knew they were in trouble. They were running out of options as the creature seemed to get stronger by the second. They were about to give up when they felt a surge of energy rush through their bodies. They looked around in awe as their powers began to glow brightly, and they realized they had reached a new level of strength. With a renewed sense of purpose, the Zodiac Alliance launched an all-out assault on the creature. They combined their abilities to launch a single, devastating attack on the creature with the force of a hurricane. The creature let out one last scream and then vanished. The town gathered around the Zodiac Alliance, thankful for their bravery and strength. They knew they had seen something incredible, and they felt renewed hope for the future. The Zodiac Alliance knew they had faced their first true challenge as they gathered their strength and prepared to return to their training facility. They knew, however, that they had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. They were the Zodiac Alliance, and they were prepared to face whatever challenges the future had in store for them. After defeating the mysterious creature, the Zodiac Alliance realized they needed to continue training and preparing for future challenges. They had learned a lot about teamwork, but they knew there was still a lot more to learn. They went back to their training facility and started a rigorous training regimen. They spent countless hours honing their individual abilities as well as learning how to use them in tandem. They concentrated on increasing their strength, speed, and endurance because they knew they needed to be in top physical condition to face whatever came their way. The Zodiac Alliance worked on developing their strategy and tactics in addition to physical training. They spent time researching their opponents and learning their weaknesses, as well as devising novel ways to use their powers to overcome any obstacle. They also worked on their communication and teamwork abilities. They recognized that their ability to effectively collaborate would be critical in any battle, so they practiced communication drills and team-building exercises. The bonds between the members of the Zodiac Alliance grew stronger as they trained and worked together. They evolved into more than just a team, they became a family. They were aware of each other's strengths and weaknesses, and they knew they could rely on one another when it counted the most. They were nearing the end of a particularly arduous training session when they received a message on their communication device. It was a warning that a formidable new foe had emerged and was planning an attack on a nearby city. The Zodiac Alliance realized they needed to act quickly. They quickly gathered and implemented their training and strategy. They assessed the enemy's strengths and weaknesses and devised a strategy to counter their attacks. They set up a series of traps and ambushes, creating illusions and distractions to confuse and weaken the enemy. They worked in unison, each member using their abilities to help and protect the others. The Zodiac Alliance faced some difficult challenges as the battle progressed. They had to change their strategy on the fly because the enemy was more powerful than they had anticipated. But they didn't give up. Instead, they dug deep and found the strength to fight on. In the end, the Zodiac Alliance emerged victorious once again. They had used their training and strategy to defeat a formidable foe, and they had done so as a team. They knew their training and preparation had paid off as they celebrated their victory. They were prepared for whatever challenges the future held, and they knew that as long as they worked together and believed in themselves, they could overcome anything. They were the Zodiac Alliance, bound together by the power of the stars and stronger together than they could ever be separate. The Zodiac Alliance knew that after defeating the powerful enemy who had threatened the city, there would be more battles ahead. They'd proven to be a formidable team, but they also knew they still had a lot to learn and improve on. They were still training and preparing for future battles when they received a distress call from a nearby town. Strange and dangerous creatures were attacking the town, causing chaos and destruction, according to reports. The Zodiac Alliance sprang into action without hesitation. They quickly gathered their belongings and made their way to town, ready to face whatever awaited them. They could see the devastation caused by the creatures as they arrived. Buildings had been destroyed, and people were fleeing in terror. The Zodiac Alliance realized they needed to act quickly to protect the town and its people. They divided into teams, each with a different section of town to protect and defend. They used their abilities to build barriers and traps, slowing the creatures and protecting the people. The creatures were unlike anything the Zodiac Alliance had previously encountered. They were swift, powerful, and appeared to be immune to some of their abilities. The Zodiac Alliance, however, did not give up and continued to fight, determined to protect the town and its people. The Zodiac Alliance faced some difficult challenges as the battle progressed. Some of the creatures appeared to be multiplying, making it difficult to keep up. But the Zodiac Alliance persisted, devising new strategies and cooperating to defeat the creatures. After what seemed like hours of intense combat, the Zodiac Alliance was victorious. The monsters were defeated, and the town was spared. The Zodiac Alliance could see the townspeople's gratitude as they walked through town, checking for any remaining threats. They had saved lives and kept the town from being destroyed, and they knew they had made a difference. The Zodiac Alliance debriefed and analyzed their performance following the battle. They talked about what worked and what didn't, and devised new strategies and tactics for the next battle. They knew there would always be more battles ahead, but they also knew they were up to the task. They were the Zodiac Alliance, a group brought together by the power of the stars and ready to face whatever the future held. The Zodiac Alliance had been on a roll, and they had begun to believe they were unstoppable. But, as the saying goes, pride comes before a fall. They received a message from an unknown source one day. According to the message, a member of the Zodiac Alliance had betrayed them and was collaborating with their enemies to bring them down. The Zodiac Alliance was stunned. They had always trusted each other implicitly, and the thought of one of them betraying the others was almost unbearable. They discovered that the message was true after some investigation. Indeed, one of their own had turned against them. They were heartbroken, but they knew they had no choice but to confront the traitor. They tried to reason with the traitor as they approached, trying to understand why they had done this. But the traitor was unrepentant, and the Zodiac Alliance was attacked mercilessly. The Zodiac Alliance fought back with all of their might, but they were outmanned and outgunned. They suffered a devastating blow when one of their own was killed in the battle. The Zodiac Alliance was in shambles after the battle. They'd lost a friend and been betrayed by someone they thought was a friend. They didn't know who they could rely on any longer. They did not, however, give up. They regrouped and lamented the death of their fallen comrade. They knew they had to fight on no matter what. They suffered numerous losses as they fought their enemies. They lost more team members, and the fights became increasingly difficult. They persisted, motivated by a desire to protect the innocent and defeat their adversaries. The Zodiac Alliance remained unbroken throughout. They knew they had each other and could rely on each other no matter what. They collaborated, sharing their strengths and supporting one another in their weaknesses. They eventually faced their most difficult challenge yet. Their adversaries had unleashed a devastating weapon that threatened to destroy everything they had worked so hard to safeguard. The Zodiac Alliance knew this was their last fight. They had no choice but to stop their enemies at any cost. The Zodiac Alliance fought with everything they had in a fierce and intense battle. They made full use of their abilities and collaborated like never before. They were ultimately victorious. They had saved the world and demonstrated that they were a force to be reckoned with. But victory came at a price. The Zodiac Alliance had lost many members in the battle, and the experience had changed them forever. They realized as they reflected on their journey that they had been through so much together. They had experienced betrayal, loss, and unimaginable difficulties. They had, however, formed unbreakable bonds and united under the power of the stars. The Zodiac Alliance knew their journey wasn't over, but they were prepared for whatever came next because they knew they could count on each other. To get to this point, the Zodiac Alliance had overcome many obstacles and overcome impossible odds. They had faced traitors, powerful adversaries, and even defeat. But they had persisted, held together by the power of the stars. They were now facing their final test. The ultimate evil had appeared, threatening to destroy everything dear to the Zodiac Alliance. The stakes were high, and the fight was fierce. The Zodiac Alliance, on the other hand, was prepared for this final showdown. To defeat the ultimate evil, the members of the Zodiac Alliance knew they had to be at their best. They put in countless hours of practice time to perfect their skills and abilities. They deliberated and devised a strategy that would give them the best chance of success. The battle day arrived, and the Zodiac Alliance was prepared. They approached the ultimate evil with vigor, their sights set on victory. The fight was fierce and brutal. The ultimate evil was a formidable foe with numerous tricks up their sleeves. The Zodiac Alliance, on the other hand, was not easily defeated. They worked together, each with their own special abilities, to defeat the ultimate evil. As the battle progressed, the Zodiac Alliance gained the upper hand. They had successfully deflected many of the ultimate evil's attacks, and they had also delivered some devastating blows themselves. But, just as they thought they had won, the ultimate evil launched its most devastating attack. The Zodiac Alliance was caught off guard, and many of them were injured as a result of the explosion. Everything appeared to be lost, but then something amazing happened. The Zodiac Alliance realized they possessed something the ultimate evil lacked: genuine friendship and unity. They stood together, their injuries and exhaustion supporting each other. They found strength in one another and refused to give up. The Zodiac Alliance launched one final assault on the ultimate evil with renewed zeal. They poured all of their strength and energy into the attack, and it was enough to finally defeat the ultimate evil. The Zodiac Alliance came out on top. They had saved the world from destruction, proving that friendship and unity were stronger than any evil. The members of the Zodiac Alliance knew they had formed bonds that would last a lifetime as they looked around at each other, battered and bruised but triumphant. They had faced impossible odds, but they had triumphed thanks to the power of the stars. And they knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together as friends and allies. After the ultimate evil was defeated, the world began to return to normalcy. The Zodiac Alliance had saved the day, and they were heroes. Despite their success, they were well aware that their journey was far from over. As the members of the Zodiac Alliance gathered to celebrate their victory, they realized they had formed an unbreakable bond. They had fought alongside one another, supported one another through thick and thin, and had eventually triumphed over evil. They'd evolved into more than just allies, they'd become a family. But with the ultimate evil gone, the Zodiac Alliance knew they had to look forward. They couldn't rest on their laurels. There was still much work to be done to make the world a safe and just place. They started talking about what their next steps should be. Some of them desired to concentrate on rebuilding the world following the destruction caused by the ultimate evil. Others desired to continue honing their skills and abilities so that they would be prepared for any future challenges. But they all agreed on one thing: they wanted to keep fighting for what was right. They knew there were still people in the world who wanted to cause harm, and they wanted to be there to stop it. The Zodiac Alliance decided to keep working together, utilizing their unique abilities and strengths to protect the world from those who would harm it. They would be a positive force, fighting for justice and peace wherever they went. So the journey of the Zodiac Alliance continued. They traveled the world, encountering new challenges and making new friends. They kept training, honing their skills and abilities, and fighting for what was right. As they traveled, they came across other people who possessed similar abilities to them. They reached out to these individuals, forming alliances with them and cooperating towards a common goal. The Zodiac Alliance understood that they were not fighting alone for justice and peace. They had each other, as well as alliances with others who shared their objectives. They were an unstoppable force when they worked together. When the members of the Zodiac Alliance looked back on their journey, they realized they had come a long way. They'd faced incredible odds and triumphed thanks to the power of friendship, unity, and the stars. And they were well aware that their journey was far from over. There would always be new challenges to face, battles to fight, and new friends to make. But they knew that as long as they had each other and remained united by the power of the stars, they could overcome anything that came their way. So, if you can relate to my story, please do like, share, subscribe, and press the bell icon to get the latest notification.